An alarm goes off. It's dark outside. You didn't choose the time. Some part of you set it years ago and now just obeys it. You get up, you go somewhere, you stay there for 8 hours, and you come home. Tomorrow you do it again and again. For about 40 years. Nobody ever explained why it's 8 hours, not 7, not 6, not until the work is done. 8. Every day, for your whole life. Here's the strange part. That number isn't natural, it isn't ancient, and it wasn't chosen for you. The 9 to 5 is a machine setting, invented for factories, fought over in blood, and locked in almost a century ago. You are running a piece of software written in 1926. So today, why do we work 9 to 5? And who decided your day should look like this at all? For almost all of human history, nobody worked hours. The idea would have sounded insane. You worked by the task. Milk the cow, plant the field, mend the net. When the task was done, you were done. Work wasn't a place you went or a block of time you filled. It was a thing you finished. How long's your work day? Until the sheep are in. And if they're in early, then it's early. Why would I stand here? Time itself was loose. You had the sun, dawn, noon, dusk, and the seasons. Summer days were long and busy. Winter days were short and slow. A medieval peasant worked hard at harvest and barely at all in January. And here's a fact that will annoy you. Historians estimate that a medieval English peasant worked fewer total hours in a year than you do, because the calendar was stuffed with holy days, feasts, saints' days, festivals. Take a third of the year off, by order of the church. And it went further than holy days. Well into the industrial age, workers held onto a tradition they called Saint Monday, an unofficial holiday nobody declared, where after a good weekend you simply didn't show up on Monday. You worked harder Tuesday to Saturday to make up for it. Employers hated it and couldn't stamp it out for decades, because the workers, not the clock, still decided when the week began. Nobody was counting your minutes, because minutes barely existed. Your boss was the sun, the weather, and the work. It was hard, but it was yours. And then someone put a machine in a tower, and it started to tick. The first thing that ever chopped human time into equal countable pieces wasn't a factory. It was a church. Medieval monasteries needed everyone to pray at the same moments, several times a day, on schedule. So monks built the first mechanical clocks, not to tell you the time, but to ring a bell that told everyone what to do. The word clock comes from the Latin for bell. Time didn't arrive as a number on a wall. It arrived as a sound you had to obey. Then the bells spread. Towns put clocks in their squares, and slowly, over centuries, something flipped in the human mind. Time stopped being the sun said so and became the bell said so. An hour became a thing that existed on its own, the same length in summer and winter, the same whether you were busy or idle. The bell rang, time to stop. But I'm not finished. Doesn't matter. The bell doesn't care about your net. I don't like the bell. That last line is the whole story of the modern workday, because once time could be measured, sliced, and counted, it could be bought, and there was about to be someone very interested in buying it by the hour. The 1800s, the Industrial Revolution, and the single biggest change in how humans work since farming. A factory is a machine that never gets tired. The steam engine runs day and night. The looms don't need a harvest or a season. And to a factory owner, the workers are just more machine parts. Parts that, annoyingly, need to be there, at the same time together, for the machine to run. Task time was useless to them. They didn't want a job finished. They wanted bodies at stations for as long as the machine turned. So they bought the one thing that could be measured and stacked. Your time. Not your work. Your hours. And they bought a lot of them. 12-hour days, 14, 16, 6 days a week. Children of 6 and 7 years old, working through the night, kept awake by overseers. The factory bell, the direct descendant of the monastery bell, now rang to open the gates. And if you were late, the gates locked and you lost the day. And the clock did not play fair. It couldn't, because whoever owns the clock owns the truth about how long you've worked. Some factory owners rigged it on purpose. They'd quietly push the clock forward through the lunch break and back during working hours, stealing minutes off every worker every day. There are records of employees forbidden to carry their own watches, so that the factory clock was the only time that existed. Time had become power, and the boss held it. A worker named it perfectly. Under this system, he said, a man was no longer paid for his labor. He was paid for his time, and his time no longer belonged to him. The clock on the factory wall wasn't measuring the work. It was measuring you. Now, nobody just hands back the hours. The 8-hour day was not a gift. It was won over about 100 years by people who were beaten and jailed and killed for it. It started with a slogan from a factory owner of all people. Robert Owen, a mill boss who thought the system was insane, coined the demand in 1817. 3/8, 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest, 888. A whole day divided 3 ways: work, life, sleep. It sounds so obvious now that it's hard to hear how radical it was. You are asking the machine to give you back 2/3 of your own existence. We want 8 hours. You'll take 12 and be grateful. 8 hours, 8 hours. Who taught them to count? The fight got bloody. In Chicago in 1886, hundreds of thousands walked off the job, demanding the 8-hour day. At a rally in Haymarket Square, a bomb went off, police opened fire, people died on both sides, and organizers were hanged on thin evidence. The world remembered the date they'd chosen to strike, the 1st of May. That's why, in most of the world, May the 1st is a workers' holiday to this day. The weekend, the 8-hour day, the very idea that your time is your own, none of it was given. It was taken back. But the slogan alone didn't win it. What finally made 8 hours normal was a man who did it not out of kindness, but because the math worked. 1914. Henry Ford. The assembly line has made him the most efficient manufacturer on earth, and his workers are quitting in droves because the work is soul-crushing and endless. Replacing them constantly is expensive. So Ford does 2 things everyone calls insane. He doubles the pay, $5 a day, and a few years later he cuts the week to 5 days and the day to 8 hours. His competitors are horrified, and then they watch Ford get richer, because Ford had noticed something. A worker who is exhausted and miserable is slow and makes mistakes. A worker who is rested and paid well and actually has 2 days off is faster, stays longer, and works better in 8 hours than a broken man does in 12. Shorter hours didn't cost him output. They bought him output. And there was one more piece, the quiet genius of it. Ford didn't just build cars. He needed people to buy cars. A worker trapped at the factory 16 hours a day, dead broke, buys nothing. Give him money and give him a weekend, and suddenly he has the time and the cash to want things, including the very car he's building. The 8-hour day didn't just make better workers, it made customers. By 1938, the United States wrote it into law. 40 hours. Over time past that, the 9 to 5 was born, not from wisdom about human happiness, but because it was the most profitable way to run a factory. And that setting, tuned for assembly lines almost 100 years ago, is the one your calendar still runs on today. So here's the question nobody at the top wants asked out loud. Why is it still 8 hours? Because look what's happened since 1938. A worker today produces several times more per hour than one did back then. The machines got smarter, the tools got faster. One person with a laptop now does what once took a whole floor of people. By every logic of that Ford bargain, the hours should have kept falling. The greatest economist of the century thought they would. In 1930, John Maynard Keynes predicted that by now, by our decade, his grandchildren would work about 15 hours a week. He wasn't crazy. The productivity gains he expected? They happened. They more than happened. The 15-hour week didn't. We're 10 times more productive than 1930. Fantastic. So we work 10 times less? No, same hours. We just make more stuff. So where did my free time go? Great question. Next slide. Here's the uncomfortable answer. The 8-hour day was built for a place where hours equal output, where every hour at the loom is another yard of cloth. But most of us don't work looms anymore. You can't measure a good idea in hours. And yet the clock survived, even though the factory that needed it is gone. We kept the bell. So we sit at desks for 8 hours, whether the work needs 8 hours or 2. Work quietly swells to fill the time, because the time is the thing being measured. We answer emails to look busy. We stay till 5 because 5 is when you're allowed to leave. You are not being paid most days for what you do. You are being paid for being there. And when people actually test this, the results are almost embarrassing. Companies and even whole countries have run the experiment, a 4-day week, same pay. Iceland tried it across thousands of workers. A firm in Japan tried it and reported productivity jumped 40%. Trial after trial finds the same thing. Cut the hours, and the work still gets done, because the extra hours were never really the work. They were just the bell, still ringing, long after anyone remembers why. So, why do we work 9 to 5? Not because it takes 8 hours to do your job, not because humans are built for it. We're plainly not. We spent most of history working by the sun and taking a third of the year off. We work 9 to 5 because a factory needed synchronized bodies. 200 years ago, workers bled to make those hours humane, and a car maker proved it was the most profitable clock to run. Then the factory left, and the clock stayed. The clock never measured your work. It measured your presence. It measured your obedience. That you were where you were told, when you were told, for as long as you were told. We automated the factory, and we kept the bell. You didn't set that alarm. Someone in 1926 set it for you. The only question left is whether you ever get to turn it off.